Well, Mr. President-elect and former President,
Thank you.
Donald, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And looking forward to having like we said, a smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So
Good.
welcome
Thank you
back.
very much. And thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate very much a transition that's so smooth. It'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Jim.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
I mean, just even looking at the body language,
For
right?
sure. One of the interesting things, President Trump deferring to President Biden there by not answering questions. And
That
other
took some
things.
restraint, you know it
for
did.
For sure, because he's been in that position. We've all been in the Oval with him, and he often liked to answer questions.
And, I'm sorry, just the imagery, the fire burning, the bust of MLK on one side, JFK on the other. I mean, wow, that is a moment. And these two men have not seen each other, I don't think, since our debate.
Oh my
I
gosh.
think
June
they might have on
27th.
9/11 just
Oh,
briefly.
on 9/11, that's
at
right.
the ceremony
That's right.
briefly.
That's right.
But
But
certainly
I'm
not
sure
have
they
had
had
a
a
moment to
conversation.
speak
Yeah.
since the debate
Yeah,
that you
and they didn't
moderated,
really
of
speak
course.
to each
Right.
other that whole time. But again, I just want to say what Donald Trump just said. Politics is tough. Transition, we want the transition to be as smooth as it can get.
And he said, I very much appreciate it to Joe. So these are, in their quiet moments, it'll take a while for us to figure out exactly sort of what is going on here, but also President Biden saying, welcome back, and committing to a smooth transition. And politics is tough is about the understatement, but a perfect way to describe it.
Also, we cannot underscore enough the transition is smooth, and him basically thanking Joe Biden for that. And what a difference in this moment versus how Donald Trump treated Joe Biden in Joe Biden's win. It's not to this moment ever admitting or conceding to Joe Biden for the 2020 election.
Which also
And
had
never
Here they are.
inviting Biden to the White House.
And
Which
never
also had an
inviting and not
effect
going to his
on
inauguration.
President Biden's approval rating, and it got his presidency off to an entirely different start. There's no doubt about it.
And I want to bring in our Caitlin Collins, who is there at the White House. And Caitlin, it is really a remarkable moment to see them sitting there together at the White House, exchanging pleasantries, very nice, very cordial. Trump himself talking about the smooth transition and the fact that, they're meeting at a place just feet away from where Donald Trump himself watched on that TV the January 6th insurrection take place. It is just a remarkable moment.
Yeah, and for that, Biden said that Trump had held a dagger to the throat of democracy on that day in that historic speech that Biden gave on the anniversary of January 6th when he was in office. And to look at that moment there where the two of them are shaking hands, it's important to keep in mind that in 68 days from now, that will be Trump's Oval Office. He will take the oath of office on the steps of the Capitol, and then at noon that day is when the power will be turned over, and Joe Biden will leave the White House, and Donald Trump will enter the White House for his second term. And I think, MJ and Kristen, looking at this and this moment, the pleasantries are being exchanged there. Certainly, it is a relationship that is broken down between the two of them where, Trump obviously has said horrible things about Biden on the campaign trail, calling him diminished and talking about him at length until he was out of the race. He said much nicer things lately. But really, to think about what this transition is going to look like, they're committing to a smooth one that was not obviously in place 4 years ago. But also the change of power is about to make the White House look a lot different when Trump takes office.
Yeah, I mean, this is really the pinnacle moment of the transition. I mean, obviously we're going to continue to see these cabinet picks. We're going to continue to see this rollout of what the staff is going to look like. But this marks the beginning of that peaceful transfer of power. And how Donald Trump handles this and how Joe Biden handles it sets the tone for what it's going to look like. And I heard Jeff saying, and I thought it was interesting, the fact that Donald Trump was deferring to President Joe Biden when it came to answering questions. He was looking at him, seeing what he was going to do. Clearly, he is trying to set this tone, and by saying it's going to be a smooth transition of power, kind of ignoring what happened last time and essentially pretending that they're starting fresh here. But he is trying to set a tone clearly with what he is saying. Obviously, we'll see if he ends up contradicting that. We know that that's often something we see with Donald Trump. But right now, it is clear what he's doing.
Well, yes, that scene was cordial. The brief pleasantries were pleasant, I guess, polite, but I do think it is worth underscoring. You know, the reason that this scene and this image is so striking is because these two men have no relationship to speak of. This is not President George W. Bush welcoming the Obamas to the White House. This is not Bill Clinton welcoming W. Bush to the White House. You look back on those images and the footage, and there is some real warmth there. There is no actual warmth, despite the fire, between those two men. We've talked about the many ways in which President Trump has talked in denigrating ways about President Biden. Biden, too, throughout the course of this campaign, referring to this person as a fascist, as a total threat to the country. And now, on top of that, he is having to say the words, welcome back, to a man who single-handedly actually could completely alter and probably already has altered his political legacy. The fact that he believed that he needed to seek a second term and then was forced out of the race, and then the vice president that he endorsed didn't end up winning. I mean, that is going to be sort of the lead sentence probably of anything that is ever written about President Biden. And here they are now just sitting a couple of feet away from each other, and he is having to say the words, welcome back.
Yeah, and you know, those relationships were not always warm between, you know, the Clintons and the Bushes, or the Bushes and the Obamas when that was happening in the moment. Certainly their political views were not aligned. But I think, you know, what this moment says, and, you know, talking about how cordial it is and how, you know, strange that is given what we know they really think about each other, it's because it's a moment that people learn not to take for granted, because 4 years ago it did not happen.
Biden said, I'm going to make sure you have everything you need. I'm going to be very accommodating. And then Trump, of course, did say thank you. But to your earlier point, that is not a gesture that was extended to Biden.
Yes, and Biden looks like what he is, the adult in that pairing, because he didn't bring up the legitimate grievances that he has left over from 2020. He just accepts it and he moved on. And Trump always says something nice in a situation like this when he is treated very well and praised. But that doesn't mean it has any long-term or even medium-term, and maybe not even short-term effect on him. We all know him. He's been out there since 2015 in a very public role as a candidate for president, and then through his term, and then he's been running ever since he left the first term. So these things are nice, and I think the symbolism is important, and Joe Biden is doing everything he can to make that a smooth transition. But it takes two to tango, and I don't think Donald Trump will be tangoing for very long.
Molly, to that point, I mean, there are questions about whether this second term will be a bit more stable than the first term, or whether it will be turbulent. And I'm curious sort of what your sense is. I mean, we heard Trump there say it's going to be a transition that is so smooth. I think he said it's going to be the smoothest transition there's ever been. That's me paraphrasing. But your thoughts about what we know so far, and whether that appears to be a more sort of disciplined administration, or if we can expect the same as 4 years ago.
Well, it's obviously much more disciplined than 8 years ago. But I think Larry's right. You know, right now, it's easy for Trump to be disciplined, or at least calm, because he is surrounded by people who are placating him and telling him he's great. And you know, where the rubber hits the road is going to be when something doesn't go his way. How does he react? And we do have a lot of experience with how he tends to behave in that situation. That being said, you know, when he won in 2016, 2016, he was very ill prepared, and the people around him did not have much of an organization. We're clearly seeing, the way he's assembling his cabinet, even the way he's approaching these leadership elections that are happening right now on Capitol Hill, is much more organized, much more done with an understanding of the way the government actually works. Some of his picks for the cabinet have been somewhat disruptive. Others have been much more normal. There's still a lot to come in terms of the people that are going to be in his administration. So I think we're all going to be looking at those signs to see what they portend. But at least for now, we are certainly looking at a situation that is far less turbulent than after the 2016 election, but that is a pretty low bar.